Hello, everybody. Welcome into The Cycle. I am Ryan Wormeli, joined as always by Mike Maher. And Maher, assuming this gets out when we think it's going to, today is opening day. We are recording this a day early, so it is not for us. But for the people listening, it is the greatest day of the year. This is like Christmas for baseball fans. It is absolutely in my top 3 days on the calendar. There's just a romanticism with spring baseball opening day, just having it back in your lives, the pageantry. I love it, and I am so excited for this season to finally be here.
You're tossing it to me? You didn't really ask me anything there.
I kind of thought we had enough of a chemistry at this point that you can feel free to jump in without needing a question. I'm not interviewing you.
Well, it's funny because the whole time you were talking, I made sure to keep like straight, clear eye contact on you, because last week someone in the YouTube comments said that like you are always great at like bringing the energy with like the intro, whereas like I'm looking around like confused about where the audio is coming from, and I'm like, first off, I'm looking at my monitors, making sure I'm prepared, but this time I made sure, locked in, ready to go.
We were on audio only last year, so you're still getting used to some of the camera stuff. Not that you haven't been on camera before, but I did it a bit more than you last season, so probably just getting used to that. I'm kind of with you though. I prefer to just kind of look off to my second monitor if I can and not have to lock in like that. But no, I mean, again, I think we've been doing this show long enough that you can feel free to jump in without a question every time.
Yeah, no, I'm excited. I'm ready for the show. I like this. I like this topic, the key questions we're going to talk about today. I haven't done a show like that before, but I've obviously watched you do it a bunch. Yeah, baseball's here. It's something that we're going to be able to do every day. Watch baseball every day for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, it's funny. Like by the time you get to the end of the season, it's not that I want the season to be over. Like you get busy with football. Like obviously, I'm when my team is good, when the Orioles are in the playoffs, I'm really caring about that. But it is easy to feel like, I mean, it's a grind. It really is, like getting through the fantasy baseball season and the baseball season in general. So you kind of get that early fall feeling of like, okay, like I'm willing to kind of focus on football here for a while. Once you hit like basically January, it's like, give me opening day, and you spend 3 months just like waiting for it. So for it to finally be here is finally very exciting. We are talking key questions today. This is one of my favorite formats that we do on the football side. We do kind of a season-long key questions preview at the beginning of the football season. Then we do a weekly key questions show with myself, Fitz, and Debro, and that's one of my favorite shows to do every week during the season. And so I kind of pitched the idea to John, our producer, of, hey, let's do a key questions for the baseball side, see if the format translates well over here. I was talking with you a little before we started recording that I found it easier to come up with key questions on the football side than the baseball side, because football, so many questions you can ask are built around context and like, oh, there's a new play caller here, or hey, if the offensive line isn't good, how is that going to affect the receivers? You know, like you kind of go through all these different factors in evaluating a player on the football side. In baseball, it's so individual, right? It's like, how is this player going to perform at the plate? How is this pitcher? How is his repertoire going to work out? I'm not really paying that close attention to, oh, this team has a new hitting coach and therefore their approach is going to be so different. That's going to drastically change their fantasy value. So I found it kind of interesting trying to approach coming up with these key questions. They're a little more individual than some of the team-related ones for anybody who's listened to the football side before. But we're going to have some fun with it, have some kind of interesting conversations about some of these players and some of the questions that we are asking each other here prior to the 2025 season. Are you ready to kick it off?
I'm ready. Let's go.
All right, let's dive in. Number one, I kind of felt like we had to start with Shohei Ohtani, just coming off a 50-50 season. I almost wonder if it's not talked about enough. Like he's clearly one of the top one or two, players in every draft. It's primarily him or Bobby Witt Jr. in every league. Everybody knows that he's the best player in baseball, but I don't feel like there's enough conversation. It gets crazy that sounds surrounding the dude went 50-50. That is actually insane. How does he follow that up, especially now that he's pitching again? I think we're all expecting a significant drop in steals. I wonder if you're also projecting to what degree a significant drop on the power side as well, or maybe you're not projecting that. What do you think about Ohtani this year?
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing when I was preparing for it, is that we don't really talk enough about how ridiculous his season was, because it wasn't just 50-50. It wasn't like 50 and 51. It was 54 and 59. He almost went 50-60, which is like, we've never even seen 50-50 before, and he just soared past those numbers. I think the biggest question here is something we've been talking about all offseason, is like, we don't really know what to make of the Dodgers, because everyone is just like, already assuming they're in the playoffs, and already like we're not even into April yet, and everyone's like, all right, they have this loaded roster, they're pretty much locked and loaded for the playoffs. Are they just going to rest guys and like be careful? He was already starting up his pitching program. Then they kind of shut it down, which is a little concerning. And now it sounds like he's ramping it back up. But it's we don't really know what to expect from Ohtani because last year he was just a full-time hitter, or really from the Dodgers what they're going to do because they're just so loaded. Can they rest people? And that's something we've talked about with a lot of their players. Like it already seems like Freddie Freeman's going to get a lot more time off. Ohtani, like, is he going to pitch? Is he going to pitch like regularly? Is he going to play every day? Like you said, is he going to run the same amount? Like he obviously wants to, has that like personal drive to be like maybe the best who's ever done it. So he's going to have that. But like, do the Dodgers just really focus on keeping players healthy? And it's really hard to like we've never seen a player do what he did last year. So how do we predict what's going to happen this year? We've never seen someone go 50-50. So you can't necessarily just like pencil that in that is going to happen again. We saw the same thing with Acuna last year where he stole 70 bases and everyone was just like, all right, he's going to go for $1 million in salary cap auction drafts and be the first overall pick. And obviously like he got hurt and that derailed it. But it's like when you see a player do something that's never been done before, how do you project the following year?
He has done crazy stuff before, obviously. Like it's not like this is his first amazing power speed combo year. He's had 2 different 40-20 seasons in the past prior to last year. He has a 30-10 season in 22 sandwich between those 2 40-20 seasons. Do you think 40-20, I'm talking 40 home runs, 20 steals, is an accurate projection for this year? Or do you think we see maybe even more regression and it's more like a 30-20, a 30-15 type of season, or because that gets into the territory of still very good for fantasy, obviously, but maybe not this clear number one pick. I mean, if he has let's say 42 homers and 26 stolen bases, he is still living up to his draft position here, even if he falls short of 50-50. But do you think he could fall even shorter to the point where it looks like it was a mistake to take him with a top 2 pick? Because I kind of feel like maybe we're going too far the other way if we say, listen, he's not going to go 50-50. The Dodgers are going to get to rest him. He's pitching again. He doesn't need to make history with that 50 stolen bases again. So why risk the injury? All that stuff. But it's hard for me to imagine he falls so far off that it starts to look like a bad pick. But maybe you feel differently.
No, I think his ceiling is so immense that he has to be, if not 101, then 102. The frustrating thing there is taking someone who's probably going to be a utility only at the 101. But I mean, there are worse problems to have than having Ohtani lock up your utility spot for the year. It seems like consensus projections have him for like 40-30 something, which is still an incredible season. It's not 54-50 mine, but that's like, if that's, your
it would be the best season for any other player you could draft this year.
Yeah. Oh, and it came with a 310 batting average last year. Like just on top of all that, that wasn't good.
And by the way, I was going to say too, like we talk about the Dodgers almost as a negative because maybe he gets extra rest, but like because of that lineup, he had 130 runs and 130 RBI too. Those are insane numbers, let alone the power and speed and batting average, right? Like a true 5 category player in like elite 5 category player, elite in every category. It's really remarkable.
I know, especially the RBI hitting where he hits in the lineup.
Yeah. So, I mean, again, we don't need to tell anybody that Shohei Ohtani's good. Everybody listening knows. But I think it's an interesting question to see what we see, even from a real life baseball perspective. What does the follow-up look like to one of these singularly great seasons in Major League Baseball history? We're going to find out. I would say I'm taking the under on his 731 plate appearances, right? That's what he had last year. I think it's really, I mean, I don't see any world where he reaches that number again. I doubt he gets to 700 this year, but if he's
still the real wild card is the pitching. And what does that do? I mean, like the greatest fear in fantasy is that, he gets hurt, because it's not like he can just get hurt pitching and still hit, because, as someone who throws righty and bats lefty, that right arm is his lead arm. And so any kind of injury to that pitching arm just derails everything he's going to do at the plate as well. And from a real baseball fan perspective, I want him to pitch and hit, because it's just like incredible that he could be like the best hitter in baseball and one of the best pitchers in baseball. But from a fantasy perspective, even in like daily lineups where you can move him back and forth as a pitcher, I almost don't even want him as a pitcher just because I don't want to because in that scenario you have to take his bat out of the lineup, and I just don't ever want to take his bat out of my lineup.
Yeah, we can move off of Ohtani here shortly, but I do think like some of the injury stuff too, like the last 3-4 years, he played 159 games, 135 games, 157 games, 158 games. Obviously, there have been long stretches of not pitching in that time, but it's not like I think sometimes when people think about like, oh man, we just need him to stay healthy. Like he largely has, at least in terms of being able to hit in the last several years. I mean, even 2020, he played 46 games. That was in a COVID year, so that was most of that season too. So it really has been since like 2019 that he had a significantly fewer number of games than played than were played in that season. And again, the pitching is such an key factor to that. But yeah, we can move off Ohtani. We're certainly expecting a huge season, even if it's not historic again. Question number 2. Speaking of historic 2024 seasons, Paul Skenes has the highest ADP of any pitcher as he enters year 2. When I checked last night, his ADP was 12th, so in that first round. Will he justify a first-round pick this season? Because this is something that across the last decade, it has become more and more rare for people to be willing to take a pitcher with their first-round pick. There's often one, but that one doesn't often, kind of live up to that first-round billing. And I often find myself coming away thinking, I wish I had just taken a hitter. Do you think Skenes, with how much hype there is coming off of that insane rookie season, will live up to that first round pick?
Yeah, so I struggle with this one because as we've talked on this show, I like the because of like how pitching falls this year, I like the strategy of trying to go pocket aces if I can get Skenes and Skubal or Skenes and like a Wheeler or Logan Gilbert. But on the other side, with all the drafts I've done and seeing how the drafts fall, there are certain hitting positions that dry up real quick. And we saw it in our weekend drafts too. First base, third base, they dry up fast. But what you do see later in drafts is a lot of pitching that, like, while not the Skenes, Skubal level, is still pretty good compared to the hitting that is available in the middle and late rounds. And so it's hard to say he is going to live up to the first round billing, but even though I do think the talent is there, and I have taken him in the first round in drafts just to try that build. It's something I'm experimenting with this year. But I do agree with you that with how drafts are falling this year, you're probably better off going hitter early, just because when you get to those middle or later rounds, your build is going to be so much better if you went hitter early, and then you could just gobble up all that cheap pitching in the middle.
So do you, the way I see it, and I'm curious, it sounds like you might see it a little differently. The way I see it is pretty binary if he's healthy or not, because that's the kind of the big question mark with pitchers, right? Obviously, is they could go at any time. If I guaranteed you 30 starts from Skenes this season, I find it really difficult to believe he wouldn't be a first round caliber option in fantasy, even given the landscape of what you're describing in terms of how elite some of these hitters are and that there's maybe more depth at pitching. I just feel like a healthy Skenes season, there's just no way he's not giving us at least like 180 innings pitched, 225 strikeouts minimum, and ERA in the low 2s. Like, it feels like I'm describing a worst case scenario of a healthy Skenes season, given everything historic pitching prospect has never given us any reason to believe that's not going to pan out in the majors. Is it as simple as if he's healthy, he will be worth it, and if he's not, he won't? Or do you see a scenario where he is healthy and it still ends up not being worth that first round pick?
No, I think if he's healthy, it's worth it. My only, I think in a vacuum, he's a locked and loaded first round pick if he's healthy. The only thing you start getting into the bigger conversation, like I was saying, is your build later in the draft. But, like I said, if I can lock in those, like those pocket aces, I like doing it. But it does make it for like a weird build this year. From like all the mock drafts and real drafts I've done, that's the only hesitancy I have. But I don't think it would be like a bad pick in a vacuum. It's just like, it can get a little bit weird in the middle rounds with going pitcher early this year.
Just to clarify, would you rather have him than Skubal? I
have him as 101, yeah.
Well, not 101, as SP1.
101 SP, yeah.
Yeah.
SP1.
I'm trying to pull it up. It's taking a while to load on my internet right now. What are his Cy Young odds?
Great question. I don't have it up either.
Well, maybe I'll circle back to that if it loads for me. All right, let's go to. Actually, I want to remind everybody that we're giving away a John Smoltz signed Braves jersey. courtesy of our friends at pristineauction.com. All you have to do to enter to subscribe to the Fantasy Pros MLB YouTube channel right now, drop a comment below on any video, and that's it. We will be announcing one lucky winner right here on the channel, so make sure to turn on those notifications so you can know when new videos are up and to claim your prize. Again, just subscribe to the Fantasy Pros MLB YouTube channel, drop a comment below on any video, and that is it to win a John Smoltz signed Braves jersey. Thanks to Pristine Auction. All right, let's go to question number 3. Kind of along those lines of the pitchers, is there any chance we get more 200-plus inning pitchers this year? Obviously, this has been a trend in recent years that this number has gotten lower and lower. I didn't feel like going back, too far because it was getting higher and higher. But at least a decade. This last year was the fewest number of pitchers we had, just 4 in 2024, tied for the fewest in at least a decade. And Logan Gilbert's 208 innings pitched was the smallest number to lead the league in that same amount of time. Again, I didn't go back any further, but it's hard for me to imagine that there was an outlier year anytime recently that would have changed those trends. Is there any chance we get more of that this year? I mean, I'm not sure who the names would be that you would highlight that could get there, or are we still kind of continuing on the trajectory of where you're going to be happy if you get 170 innings from a guy?
Yeah, it's hard to project that we're going to get more, just given how we're seeing, the trends in baseball, because there's a number of factors at play. There's the injuries. There's what's happening with how teams are approaching, like more velocity and fewer innings and fewer times through the order. We saw the Rays, kind of like championing that, like they did like the opener thing where they had a closer pitch or, a late reliever pitch, like one or two innings, and they had a starter come in for like 3 or 4 innings. And they also have, a quick trigger on, getting a pitcher out of there. If he's gone through whatever inning you're in, if he's gone through the lineup more than 2 times, getting him out of there. And so there's a lot of factors at play that are reducing, overall innings, and, teams that are investing in these pitchers are spending a lot of money and they don't want to be without them for long periods of time. There were 9 pitchers who had more than 185 innings pitched last year. So there were at least a pack of them, like right there near 200, and then 21 total, including the ones that you mentioned, had 180 or more innings pitched. So it's possible we get more, just if like some of that pack happens to get like 15, 20 more innings. But like you said, given the downward trend, it's hard to project more than that.
Yeah, I kind of feel like the answer is no. I like 4 might be enough of not an outlier.
I feel like you wouldn't appreciate it if I just said no.
No, I wouldn't.
That's my answer.
4 is really small. So like I wouldn't be surprised if we get more than 4, but it's not like
it's 4 and Wheeler had exactly 200.
Yes, that is true. But I feel like we're not going to see like a trend reversal this season, I wouldn't think.
No, I think if it's more, it's like a few more.
Yeah, I do think that's possible. And I think it's what I think is more like, here, let me ask you this. Is it more likely that we get more than 4 200 inning pitchers this year, or that the one person who leads the league in innings pitched has more than what Gilbert had last year? Because I think that's more likely. I think not even having anybody at 210 is not going to be the case this year. I feel like it only takes one guy to be durable and just have that kind of a season and stay healthy. So I do think that number will be higher. But as far as like the number of guys hitting that threshold, I think it'll be in the same range. And I really just bring up the question to kind of highlight that, like, when you look at players, like, for example, a player that I really like this year is Hunter Green. And you look at last year and you say, okay, well, he only threw 150 innings last year. That's not far off from what the upper tier of pitchers are going to be throwing, I don't think. Like, outside of the maybe half dozen that are going to hit 200, you're talking about like 15 to 30 innings fewer than those other guys. That's not zero. I also think he'll throw more than 150 this year. That's not zero of a difference, but it is like, I just bring that up to say, like, you don't need that many innings to still be a viable starting pitcher if you're contributing in strikeouts and ERA and everything else like that.
Yeah. Do you have the list up? Did you see who had the second most innings after Logan Gilbert?
I don't have it up now, but I can get it.
I have it up
quickly.
I was just wondering if you remembered. Seth Lugo. You could have given me 100 guesses. I wouldn't have guessed Seth Lugo.
I remembered Gilbert and Wheeler. I forgot who the other two were when I was looking at the list. Who's third?
So it's Logan Gilbert, Seth Lugo, Logan Webb, and then Zach Wheeler had exactly 200.
Yeah, I knew.
And then Aaron Nola, 2 Phillies on the list. Aaron Nola had 199 in the third.
Yeah, so close, but All right, let's go to question number 4. This is an interesting one, and I want to be clear that I recognize there were rookies who were good last year, but it felt, at least anecdotally, like a bit of a down year for top hitting prospects, especially making their debuts. Jackson Holliday was obviously kind of the most prevalent one in my world, with him really, really struggling despite being the number 1 overall prospect in baseball. But it wasn't just him, the Rangers outfielders, but like I thought Evan Carter was going to be awesome. He was terrible. I thought Wyatt Langford was going to be awesome. He had moments, but certainly did not live up to some of that prospect helium that he had during draft season. You know, Junior Caminero didn't light the world on fire when he was there. Again, a guy like Jackson Churio too, like he kind of fit this bill for the first 2 months of the season. Then he looked really good in the second half of the year, but it was a long adjustment period for him. So I'm wondering if you think 2025 as a rookie class will buck that trend of, hey, when a guy gets called up, maybe you don't just want to pick him up and like spend all your fab and immediately throw him into the starting lineup, because that did not work out for a lot of the biggest names in the prospect world last year.
Yeah, I think you can expand it more than just last year. I'm not recalling specific names, but this has been a trend in like the last few years, at least, with just what we're seeing with pitching, with the advances we're seeing in pitching. Hitting is slower to...
Jordan Walker a couple of years ago. Francisco Alvarez hasn't really lit the world on fire. I'm just looking at MLB pipeline to remind. Yeah, Spencer Torkelson, Riley Green had a bit of a slow start. So yeah, I mean, you're right. Kelenic. It's not just last year.
Kelenic is someone who just never lived up to the billing. It just seems like the jump from the upper minors into the major leagues, the pitching is just at a different level, and that hitters who are just tearing the cover off the ball in the minors are getting up to the major leagues and struggling because it's just at a different level with the pitching development that we're seeing, and just how hard it is to hit in today's game with increased velocity, increased tunneling, increased movement, and spin rates and all that stuff. It just seems like I read a really interesting article on the Red Sox and their big 3 prospects of how they're like training their prospects to hit, and they use a machine that just like mimics exact pitches from pitchers around the league with like velocity and spin rates and movement. And that feels like what these young hitters are going to have to do to prepare themselves for that upper level. But I think, I put a bunch of names in the sheet of just like players I was thinking of who we're going to see as rookies this year, or young hitters this year who kind of have a mix of different hitting profiles that we're probably going to see some ups and downs, like Cam Smith, Christian Crawford, Jackson Holliday again. Like what how does his adjustment look? Dylan Cruz, Jason Dominguez, Jacob Wilson, Matt Shaw, and then like on a lower tier, not a lower tier, but like players who probably aren't going to debut right in April, but we could see in May and June, Roman Anthony, Kobe Mayo, Marcelo Maher. It'll be interesting because there are a lot of like really exciting hitting prospects, but like you said, we've seen a lot of young hitters come up and struggle, and I think we're probably going to see that happen again.
So at the risk of sounding like an idiot, one of those names you mentioned, who is Christian Crawford? Or did you mean
Campbell.
Christian Campbell?
Campbell, yeah, wrong name.
Okay.
I don't know why I wrote Crawford.
Well, I was like, listen, it's maybe
funny
it's
as a Red Sox fan, I got that wrong too.
I was like, maybe it's some prospect I hadn't heard of that like Welsh had mentioned to you once, or I'm gonna out my. Okay, obviously I'm aware of Christian.
No, I wrote it in the sheet wrong last night and then just read it.
Just read it.
Ron Burgundy without even thinking about it.
Yeah, I mean, so I guess what I would ask you is this: would you go into this year knowing what this has looked like in recent years? Would you go in saying, I mean, Matt Shaw is somebody that I'm in on this year at cost. Like, would you go in saying, I'm still interested in investing in these guys and I'm not going to hold the struggles of recent classes against them? Or would you go into this year saying, rather than invest in these top rookies again, I'm going to invest in the guys who didn't do it last year, but who now have adjusted? Caminero, Evan Carter's going really late. Wyatt Langford is later than he was last year. Would you invest in those guys instead, saying, well, now they've gotten that adjustment period out of the way?
I think it's a mix. I am investing a lot in Cam Smith just because he was going really late and he's really exciting, and just like the news coming out of Astros camp is just like how excited they are about him, and so it's hard not to get excited with those reports. Also, and like I just said, he's going to play the outfield for the Astros, it sounds like, but he's coming up as a third baseman, so he's third base eligible, really shallow position. Same thing with Matt Shaw. I'm in on both Shaw and Cam Smith. And obviously we've talked about Jason Dominguez. I'm excited about him a lot this year too. So it does seem like I'm more interested in those younger guys. I'm not really trying to invest in Evan Carter this season. I don't have any shares. Jackson Holiday, I've said before, I think we're still a year away from him, being really valuable in fantasy. But that could also just be not like confirmation bias, but like, or recency bias, but like, it's kind of like you like Cam Smith and Matt Shaw, they're like the shiny new toy. Like Jackson Holiday, Junior Caminero, I kind of like saw some things I didn't like, and it's hard to get that taste out of my mouth.
Let's go to question number 5 here. Will we get one last ride from a hopefully healthy Mike Trout? I think anybody who's listened to the cycle this year knows how you feel about it, but it felt like he was such a talking point for us. We had to include him on here. So we can go quick on this one since we all know your opinion. But will we get one last ride from Mike Trout?
Yes. And it's funny in our draft, I talked a couple weeks ago about how, doing more and more of these drafts, I've been so in on Mike Trout, I should probably not draft him as much as I have been, or at least start to diversify my portfolio a little bit. And I just drafted him again this weekend. So like if and when he goes down, I'll be going down too.
You and I did 2 different salary cap drafts together this weekend. How did you feel about those teams coming out of it?
Mixed. In the one draft we did on Sunday, I took over an orphaned dynasty team, and it's a project. And like I told you, it's a 12-step program that I'm putting that team through. I am their higher power, and we've hit rock bottom, and we are now going to try to build this up into the best version of ourselves. So I took I tried to acquire assets in that league. Young players, young controllable players, or veterans that can, either keep me afloat for a little while, or that I'll be able to flip at the deadline. And then
worth noting for that league quickly that it's not a true dynasty. There's no like first year player draft, so there's no incentive to lose. It's just you want to have affordable, controllable assets that you can then have more money to spend with in next year. It's more like a really deep keeper than a true dynasty. Yeah. So from that perspective, you have no incentive to lose.
Yeah, it's very much like a hybrid keeper dynasty league. Like you said, really more of like a deep keeper league with with
some prospect spots. Yeah.
And then the other league we're in is it's kind of redraft focused, but it is also it's a short term keeper league. I felt good about that team coming out of the draft, but then like the next day we got the Mookie Betts news where like he's still really sick and like having struggled. He like lost because at first it came out it was like he has a stomach bug, he lost a bunch of weight, and I was like he'll be fine. And then like the day after our auction, it was like, he's still sick and he lost another 8 pounds. And I was like, okay, this is not good. Like he still can't keep food down. It's been like almost 2 weeks now. This is not a great scenario.
Yeah, I'm in your position in that league. We're kind of reversed where I took over the orphan. It's just like a shallow keeper league. There's only 5 spots. So it's less of a, total teardown than it would be in the league you joined in. Of mine, but we'll be having fun in a couple leagues together this year, so we'll be talking about that throughout the season.
Yeah.
Depending.
And
on
you took Byron Buxton in that league, so you get to enjoy that experience.
I didn't really want to, but I just kind of fell into it and needed some outfielder help, and he was cheap, obviously. So with that, let's get into Microsoft's chasing challenges. Welcome to this week's Chasing Challenges, brought to you by Microsoft. Just like the athletes who push boundaries and redefine what's possible, business decision makers today are turning challenges into opportunities. Microsoft meets you where you are with tools and guidance that help you make an impact with safe, secure AI solutions. Players and teams are facing their own challenges. In this segment, we spotlight athletes or teams that are currently undergoing a challenge, what this means from a fantasy or betting standpoint, and examine how we think they can overcome them. With whatever challenge you're facing, Microsoft empowers you with the experience to say, bring it on. This week, we're discussing the challenge faced by Mike Trout, coming back from another injury-plagued season. Trout was the best player of the last decade, one of the best baseball players of all time, but the second half of his career has been riddled with injuries. Those injuries have robbed Trout and his fantasy managers of lots of greatness, and it looked like he might be back last April when he hit 10 home runs, was running the bases even more than he had in recent years. How can he overcome his latest health setback and become a league winner again? Maybe moving off center field will help him focus on the bat. Or maybe he'll turn back the clock and find himself healthy once more. If he does, he'll be one of the best values in drafts this spring. That's it for this week's Chasing Challenges. Remember, Microsoft's AI solutions empower you to take bold steps and make informed decisions, sparking new ideas to help drive your business forward. With Microsoft as your trusted partner, you can navigate your journey with confidence, finding innovative solutions and reaching new possibilities. Visit Microsoft.com/challengers to learn more. All right, Maher. Let's go to question number 6 here. Stolen bases are up across the league after recent rules changes, as everybody knows. Even still, on an individual level, Ronald Acuna is the only player to hit 70 stolen bases in a season in at least the last 15 years. Actually, I think it is exactly 15 years. I think 15 years ago, Ellsbury was the last person to do it. But it's been 15 years, so a decade and a half since any player besides Acuna has hit 70 stolen bases in a season. There are lots of candidates this year, I feel like, more than I have felt like in recent years, where I look at them and say, they could top that number. Do you think anybody will hit that number this year, or will it continue to be more of a raising of the floor of stolen bases, less so than this high-end ceiling?
I do. I think we're going to see, continue to see the trend of more players running and teams letting, not that like teams are moving away from analytics, but it seems like more and more teams are, because of the new rules changes. And, now they have another year of data of like stolen bases and how they turn into runs and success rates and all that stuff. So the analytics are changing a little bit. I think teams are going to let players run. And I think we have some interesting candidates who could potentially steal 70 bases. Ohtani is obviously one. I would, like we said before, I don't know if he's going to run as much or if they're going to let him run as much, but it also wouldn't surprise me if he's like, you know what, I'm going to go steal 70 bases this year, because he's the kind of player who I think he can just decide to do something. Like he's like, you know what, I'm going to hit 50 home runs this year. And like he will, just because he's that good. So I think if he goes out there and has a goal of 70 bases, I think he'll do it. I said in a much earlier episode of the cycle that I think Ellie De La Cruz could go wild on the base paths, even more, and he could steal 70 bases, because I think one of my bold predictions is that he's going to combine for 100 home runs and stolen bases with the potential for 70 there. Bryce Terang is someone who has a lot of speed. I don't know that he'll get there, because I have some hitting concerns about him, and if he's going to stay in the lineup every day, even though he's a really good defender too. Victor Robles is someone I wrote down as a potential, potential, just because we saw that really strong second half with the Mariners. He stole 34 bases last year. 26 of those came in the second half. Yeah. 26 of those came in the second half, when he also batted like over 300. So with a full season with the Mariners leading off, can he get there? And then the other name, I think there's some questions of like, his hit tool too, but like Victor Scott. Victor Scott, 1 year in the minors, stole over 90. So like, who's to say if he's in the lineup every day, he can't do it too?
Well, you didn't even mention the guy from my bold predictions, Chandler Simpson, who will need to be getting playing time at the big league level for that to happen, but probably the fastest guy in baseball. So if he ever gets a chance, I think he could steal a lot more than 70 in a season, truthfully. He had like 90 something, 100 something in the minors last year, like, as much speed as anybody. And I think Xavier Edwards is another one that, we liked in draft season, that like 70 is probably too far, but if he has a strong season, on the base, like from what we saw last year, if he takes a small step forward, I think he could do a lot more there as well. He's less likely than some of the other names you mentioned, but I just wanted to throw him out there as a guy that I really like in that regard. But yeah, to me, like Victor Robles is my favorite one, just in terms of where he's going in drafts and what we saw in the second half of last year. I am buying in that it was a legitimate breakout, and the fit in Seattle's great. Doesn't seem to be worried about that hit by pitch on their wrist or hand or whatever it was a couple days ago. So I'm all in on Robles as a source of steals, and like 70 maybe he doesn't get, but I'm like thinking he's going to get at least 50. Honestly, I'm really in on Robles this year. I mentioned Acuna. Kind of speaking of him for our next question here, I want to ask about both Braves stars coming off of injury, because we have both Ronald Acuna and also Spencer Strider. This was SP1 last year, like with a bullet. This was, the 101 last year with a bullet. Will they reclaim their perches atop their respective positions by the end of the season? Obviously, throughout the course of the year, if they're not starting at the big league level, that's going to be really difficult. But by the end of the season, will it seem like they're kind of back to being those guys? Or do you think it will maybe take a little more time? And thinking of Acuna especially, he wasn't the mega elite player the year after the last time he had the ACL injury. He was still, a very quality fantasy player to have on your roster, but it wasn't Ronald Acuna. So I'm wondering for both him and Strider what you think we'll see out of them this season.
Well, let's hope that They both are because I drafted both of them in our draft this weekend. So I'm going to have to tread water in April and hope I can get into May and with them both coming back. The really encouraging thing about Spencer Strider is we saw him debut in the spring and he looked really good. Velocity was down like a tick or two, but he still just struck everybody out and looked like Spencer Strider. So that's really exciting that he's like just getting back on the mound and already kind of looks like his old self. So that's really exciting that he might only miss a couple weeks before he's back in the lineup. It sounds like Acuna won't be back until some point in May. He's already talked about not running as much, which, is not something you want to hear as a fantasy manager, but also, he's a guy who has now torn 2 ACLs. So maybe it was kind of like a freak injury. So I kind of put this out there when that quote kind of first came out of like, it only takes one stolen base, one play to tear your ACL. So who's to say like you would tear your ACL on your 60th stolen base versus your 12th? So it's kind of like a weird, strategy of like, I'm still going to run, but like not as much. Especially because like when he tore his ACL, it wasn't even really like a pure stolen base. It was like such a freak kind of accident. So we'll see if that holds true, if he really doesn't run as much, but that's something where, if he's not hitting as many home runs and not running as often, he wouldn't be the old Acuna, but I do still think he's going to be really, really good, but remains to be seen if he's going to be like the, or one of the best like hitters in baseball.
So we have a question coming up later kind of about guys who might leap into the first round next year. I want to kind of frame this along those same lines. I'll put it to you like this. Where will these guys be drafted in 2026? Again, not what will they finish this year because they're going to miss some time, but by the end of the year, we will be talking to these guys as will Acuna be back to like maybe if not the consensus number 1 pick, a top 5 pick again, or will it be the running will be, enough down that we don't view him in that light anymore? Will Strider be back at SP1 or will Skenes and Scooble hold him off, or will he not even be close if he struggles? Like, what do you kind of expect for 2026 rankings for these two?
I think it's more likely. I think if Acuna comes back and looks like Acuna, he could be back and he should be back in the first round next year. I don't think he's going to take over back as like 101 unless like something crazy happens at the top of the top 5 or all 5 of those guys get hurt or disappoint. Just because even if he comes out and looks really good, we're still going to have those 2 torn ACLs in the back of our mind of like, it's hard to go 1-on-1 with a guy with that injury history. I do think it's more likely that Strider maybe not more likely that he's back in the first round, but that he's back in that Skenes Scooble tier of like, maybe a top 3, just because he already, like I said, he already came back. He already looked really good. And with pitchers, there's always kind of, it's like every pitcher has injury concerns at this point. And so if we're like another year removed from his injury and he doesn't have any setbacks, it's a little bit easier to kind of like put that in the back of your mind as opposed to, a hitter with Acuna's ACLs.
You can manage your fantasy baseball lineups and dominate your leagues with My Playbook from FantasyPros. My Playbook is a suite of powerful tools to help you make better decisions, manage your lineups, and win your leagues. You can import your team to get custom fantasy baseball news, rankings, and analysis. Sync your leagues today at fantasypros.com/MLB My Playbook or download the Fantasy Baseball My Playbook app. All right, just 3 questions left here. Maher, this one I'm kind of throwing you a bone with the Red Sox. Just how good will Garrett Crochet be in Boston with a presumed full workload? And this isn't just me letting you talk about the Red Sox. I do think it's really interesting because I think everybody knows how good he is when he's pitching, and everybody knows that we're expecting a step forward in the workload this year. We haven't seen him take a step forward like this in workload. Like, obviously, like it wasn't just last year, the year before. Doesn't have a lot of innings to his name. Like, there is a small part of me that is a little like in the back of my mind, not saying like, oh, he's definitely going to get hurt, but I'm like, listen, he combined for 66 innings the last 3 years, because obviously he didn't pitch in 2022. Like, it was already a huge leap forward last year to get to 146. Getting that even higher kind of concerns me. The strikeouts will be there. I wonder what the ERA will look like, even with this great season last year, 3.58. So that's kind of a lot of preamble, but what do you make of him kind of taking that step forward?
Yeah, well, I think the like you said, the most important part of your question is presumed full workload. Because if we're getting a full workload, I think we're seeing, a Cy Young level season from him. It's just a matter of what's the workload look like. And does he stay healthy? Because if he does, I think it's going to be really, really good. I guess I'll take the L last year because we talked about Garrett Crochet a lot last year, and I was concerned all year, like, what's the workload look like? He threw 12 innings the year before. Like, how many innings are we going to get? And the fact that we got 146 is pretty wild. But we've also never seen him have a second season, after a workload like that. Like, we like a full 146 after 12 is a pretty big jump. So it would seem really simple to be like, all right, he had 146 last year, maybe he can do like 170 this year. But like, we've never seen him have a full workload, go through a full off season, and then do it again. So how does his body and his arm bounce back from that? 3.58 ERA last year. Expected numbers were all like a run better than that. So expected numbers were even better. And 209 strikeouts in only 146 innings. So if you're telling me we're going to get like 160, 170 innings, does he strike out 250 guys? He might. He might be the most valuable pitcher in fantasy. And the only reason he's not going in that same tier with like Skenes and Squibble is because of the injury concern, because stuff wise it's there. And, we're seeing it in, I know you don't care about spring training stats, but he looks really, really good in this spring. 30 strikeouts in 15 innings.
He has been in Major League Baseball since 2020. The first 4 years of his career, 2020, 2021, 2022, 2023, he totaled 73 innings pitched. He threw 146 last year. He literally doubled his career innings pitched total across the last 4 seasons into last year. That's a red flag to me. Just historically, that like worries me. And if I'm overly pessimistic and I'm wrong, and he does have a healthy season, I think you're right. I think 250 strikeouts is like super on the table if he has a reasonably healthy season and, takes another step forward in these innings pitched. But I get really worried. Like I was not drafting him anywhere really because I was concerned. And every pitcher has injury concerns, and maybe I'm just talking myself out of it. But I feel like I could have a lot of FOMO with Crochet this year, but I just found myself really worried. Truthfully, like every time he came up in draft season at his ADP, I just couldn't stop staring at that leap in innings pitched and get worried.
Yeah, and it's also like you talked about his professional, his major league innings. It's not like you're missing a bunch of minor league innings there too. There's like 12 more innings if you count minor leagues. So it's not like there's anything else there. Yeah, despite being really excited about him, I don't think I have any shares for the reasons you mentioned. He's going really early. He's creeping into the second round, like almost the tail end of first rounds in some high stakes leagues. And it's hard for me to get there for all the reasons we've already talked about, even though I am really excited about him as a pitcher.
Yeah, so we'll see. Second year as a starter, new everything, new team that will be better around him, which I mean shouldn't go unnoticed and unmentioned. Like that will help, I can only imagine. So I think when he's on the mound, like I'm not doubting Crochet in the slightest, but we'll see what happens with the workload. Question number 9, speaking of Crochet, are any White Sox worth rostering besides Luis Robert? I'll let you answer, and then I want to pose a question to you, but you can answer that question first.
Sure. So I looked into this last night, and there is one player I actually, put my money where my mouth is. I actually added one of these players in a league last night, and it's Miguel Vargas, who I think has some deep sleeper potential this year. He's a prospect I always liked with the Dodgers. He always kind of came up and struggled, but I also always had questions about how the Dodgers, it's not like he came up with the Dodgers and they're like, all right, you're playing every day and you're going to be fine. It was like he came up, he played, he sat, he played, he sat, and the results weren't great. He has not had success at the major league level, but I do think he has a really promising like prospect profile, and he's still just 25 years old. He's going to a situation where he should play every day. It looks like he's going to be the starting third baseman, potentially bat leadoff for the White Sox. And like we've been talking about, third base is really shallow. And I think, there is some, like, I'm not saying you need to go out and like add him everywhere, but I'm at least rostering him for now in a couple of leagues and like seeing what's there, because, there's a potential that you get some decent production out of the top of that lineup. If they give him like full run time and just like let him work through whatever he needs to work through at the major league level, I do think there's still a good hitter inside of Miguel Vargas somewhere.
Do you know where, besides Robert, the next highest White Sox player is ranked in our ECR?
So are you asking me the number or the name? Not that I know either one, but
both, I guess. Well, in ADP, it's the same name, but it's even further down. I will say where they're going.
Is it Andrew Vaughn?
Andrew Vaughn is the name. Can you guess his ECR and or ADP?
350.
It's okay. It's a little better than that. So his ECR is actually in the 260s. His ADP is 306 though. So there is not a single player on this team besides Luis Robert who is going inside the top 300 picks in drafts.
Wow. Yeah.
Just we talked about the Dodgers on one end of the spectrum. White Sox are definitely on the other. Let's get to the last question here. And this one, I'm just kind of, rather than posing a question, I want us to each pick a couple players here. We're going to pick one player in the first round this year who will be outside the top 25 in 2026, and pick one player outside the top 25 this year who will be a first rounder in 2026. We've talked about some players that we think could rise and fall, but some of them, like Churio, for example, is a guy we've talked about a lot. He's already inside the top 25 this year, so we have to look a little deeper for somebody to make that leap. You can go first here.
So for someone, I cheated. I picked two. But if we're going to go, the one is easy. We already talked about Garrett Crochet. If he has this kind of season with that full workload that we're talking about, he could be a first round pick next year. So we don't have to spend a ton of time talking about him. We've already talked about him and the potential there. But he's one on the pitching side. So I picked a pitcher and a hitter. The hitter is James Wood, office, sexiest guy in the office, or whatever award we were talking about it the other way. Hottest in the office, the Ryan Howard Award.
In the office.
Yes. Yeah. I knew it was one of those. The James Wood. He's someone who, I just answered this in a question on Discord too. They were asking who could have that kind of Jarren Duran, like 1 year to another rise in both production and then fantasy value. And I was like, it's probably James Wood, there's a very realistic, he's just outside the top 25. I forget exactly where he was, but I know he qualified when I was looking at this, but he's someone who, has all the tools and should get all the runtime. And there's a very real possibility he's a first round pick next year.
So I'm annoyed that you cheated because I picked James Wood as my only pick as the guy to jump up in the first round. So you kind of stole my thunder there. Everybody knows that I like James Wood. I've talked about him a lot. Just to mix it up from that, since you kind of stole him, I will point out that I'm not necessarily betting on this to happen, and he's somebody that I haven't actually drafted that much of. But if we're just talking ceiling, I do think O'Neal Cruz is somebody who that's a possible outcome for him. He obviously has all the talent in the world and all the athleticism in the world. If he takes a step forward, he's ranked 40th right now. It would not shock me. We in fact got some bold predictions when we did that episode from some of the listeners who felt like he could be in for a really crazy power speed combo type of season. So I'll throw Cruz out there. The other obvious name is Acuna, which it's too obvious. Yeah. So we'll kind of move past that one. Did you mention the guy that you think could drop out? And did I just miss you saying that?
I did not. We didn't talk about that one. I think it's Kyle Tucker. And it's not to say I don't like Kyle Tucker. I do like Kyle Tucker. I'm trying to see how many times I can say Kyle Tucker within the 30-second span. I struggled with who I thought could drop out because obviously they're first-round talents. They're all really good. He's going to a new situation. He's in a contract year. Normally that means better production, but it could also mean more pressure. Doesn't have a lot of protection in that lineup. Just had an injury-plagued 2024. So if there is any kind of injury situation in 2025, now he's coming into next season with more injury concerns. That can also drop you out of the first round. But more than anything, I just think that lineup is not great, and he doesn't have a ton of protection. And so that could lead to, even though I still really like him, there's a universe where his production really, really drops off a cliff because of what's around him. He gets pitched around. There's not a lot of people on base. And that could drop him out of the first round next year. So it was hard to pick a name, but he's the one I went with.
Well, remember, so I also found it hard to pick a name. Remember, it wasn't will they drop out of the first round, it's drop out of the top 25. And I really did not have a lot of good answers on this one. Mm-hmm. I was like maybe if Carroll has another really bad batting average year, like Ellie, I could see there's
Carroll was the name I was going to go with because of the shoulder, but it seems like he's better now. Yeah. I also Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but
okay.
that was the name I was going to go with. And the reason I didn't go with him is because because you mentioned his top 25, I was misspeaking. The reason I didn't think he would drop out of the top 25 is that even if he has kind of a down year again, which he just had kind of a half down year, I still think his stolen bases are enough of a floor for him that he won't fall that far.
And that's similar to Ellie too. Like I could see a world where De La Cruz has like a bad batting average year. Maybe the power doesn't take the step forward we think, but like you just know he's going to get 50 stolen bases, and outside the top 25 is tough. So I actually do think like I'm the one who posed this question, and then I found myself really struggling. Like maybe Lindor, another year older. The one that like I really was kind of thinking like, and I'm going to set aside the possibility of an injury to Ohtani because that, you know, we've already talked about that. And if any of these guys get hurt, that's going to be like a real difference maker in this conversation. I thought maybe Aaron Judge you could squint and make the case for. Like he is into his, you know, he's 32 right now. He's had some injury stuff in the past that have limited some seasons. I know he had the 322 batting average last year. That's his career high. Every other year besides 2022, he's been more in that like 250 to 280 range. So if that takes a step back and he's more hitting like, you know, in the low 30s home runs, like I said, it really feels like kind of a stretch. He's somebody that's not going to give you the stolen base floor that the other guys are. So if he has a down year on the power, having said that, in the last 3 years, he's hit 150 home runs. So it's not that I consider that to be likely. I thought it was easier to find people to jump into the first round than people who would drop out.
There's kind of a dark horse one now is Mookie Betts. If this really turns into like a lost season, and I'm not saying it will, but if this kind of weight, you know, because it's hard to just put on weight during a Major League Baseball season. It's probably in his bit.
That feels to me like, oh, now he's a second round pick, not now he's into the third round. Like I feel like next year, if he's back healthy and has weight again, I will be like, and he falls to the second round, I will be scooping up Mookie everywhere.
I would say yes.
Like that would be the case.
I would say yes, except for this. And he just missed time last year, 116 games, 19 home runs, 16 stolen bases. He's not stealing 20, 30 bases anymore. He's stealing he's stealing like 10, 12, 14, 16 bases. He'll be 33 next year. And what if he hits 18 home runs and steals 14 bases this year? And now he's 33 and he dealt with some injury or weight issues. It's not out of the realm of possibility that he's the one who falls too.
Yeah.
Even though I really like him as a player, but I think, if we're just trying to project, he's 33, he's, power speed isn't necessarily there anymore. Now he's, because if those numbers dip just a little bit, now he's just another guy.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see. I think, like I said, we have a lot of optimism of guys to take leaps forward, but somebody's got to make room for them if they are jumping in the first round. So we'll see how that goes. A year from now will be fun to watch throughout the season. That's going to do it for our preseason stuff. I mean, like I said, this is dropping on opening day, so preseason is over. I hope everybody had a great time following us last few weeks. I hope everybody enjoyed, everything going on with Welsh and Joe and everything on some of the other shows on the feed. We will be here in season. Our in-season show returns next week. It's going to look similar to how it did last year in terms of the format. We have a couple small tweaks coming in terms of some of the segments we're talking about, but it's going to be largely the same, kind of reacting to the news and everything happening during the week, talking about maybe some waivers guys, some trade options, some two-start pitchers and stuff like that. But it'll be the show that hopefully you came to know and love a year ago. And we're always open to ideas, and if anybody has thoughts on how we can mix it up, especially the YouTube audience, which didn't have the show last year, definitely drop those comments in there and let us know what you think. But yeah, we're excited to be diving into another full season here, going from draft mode to in-season mode is going to be a full time. Make sure to tune in next week on the FantasyPros MLB YouTube channel or wherever you listen to podcasts to see what we got going on. Any other final thoughts here, Maher, before we wrap it up?
No, that's it for me.
All right, we'll get out of here on that. For Maher, I'm Ryan Wormeli. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. We'll see you again next week for our in-season show.